Oh, okay. So here. Screen కనిపించదేమో స్క్రీన్ కనిపించదేమో నిల్చుంటాయి. Fine, I'll manage. All right, so good afternoon everyone to even the online guys. So hope you guys are doing well in this third phase of COVID. So today we have assembled here to discuss one of the most important documents of Government of India, which happens every year. So if you have observed, yesterday was one document. Yesterday was the day of one document that the Government of India has submitted. And today is another document, which is nothing but your budget. So what's budget? First of all, the question that needs to be asked is, what is a budget? Yeah, so obviously yes. So budget is a document which, as the simplest definition of budget is a document which tells us about the inputs and the output, or the revenues and the expenditure of the Government of India in one particular financial year. Right? So before budget is announced, before the budget is presented, there is one document which is your economic survey. So generally speaking, so if this is your budget, yes, obviously economic survey will be of the previous year, not the budgets year. Be careful with that. Most of the times that's the mistake that's done online. They say that economic survey is also of 2022-23. When 2022 itself is not done, how can you give a review of 2022? You will notice it. You just go back and see, like online guys, so the online portals. So economic survey is the survey of the economy of the past year. And budget is the prospective numbers of the future year, of the coming financial year. So this is 2022-23, which is also called as financial year 23. So just be thorough with the terminology. It will help you to remove certain confusions. So it is also called as financial year 23. This budget is also relevant. It also becomes important because of the obvious reasons of COVID, right? So COVID is one black swan event. There is something called as black swan event. What is a black swan event? Of course, the third phase, the third round of COVID didn't become a black swan event. But when COVID struck for the first time, it was kind of a black swan event. What's a black swan event? Anyone? Is it working? Because it's still saying connecting. Call someone. Is it working? Just check. Connect. Okay, fine. If it's working, then fine, because error వచ్చిndi yellow alert. Okay, fine. So a black swan event generally is an event which no one has expected. Generally, when you plan for something, you plan for your negatives also. Like, like worst case scenarios. You plan for A, eventuality A. But if A doesn't happen, what's your plan B? So that's kind of that's how people plan. Best example, like when you must have said that you're going for UPSC, your parents or your brother would have asked, if not UPSC, what's your plan B? That is normal planning. That's how planning is done. But a black swan event is an outcome where you can't plan for. So COVID is a black swan event when it came for the first time. So third phase is not. Now everyone has prepared for the eventuality, for the worst outcome of COVID. So keeping that aside, so everyone has prepared for this black swan event. And what are the so COVID what have been the impacts of COVID on, of course, we are talking from an economic sense, not the general, there are many impacts of COVID. But if you look at the impacts of COVID, first and foremost has been on economic growth, right? Growth has completely, it has been completely shattered. Growth has completely, gone RE. So we don't know, there's you must have read, historical negative growth figures. So obviously, growth, and once growth falters, in fact, growth is a final outcome. Growth depends upon many other factors. What are they generally? When you are reading national income, the most important 4 factors which contributes for your GDP are what? Can anyone tell me? Is this visible? Is this color visible? Okay, yeah. What are the 4 important constituents of national income? Come on, come on, come on. Because the entire budget depends upon that. Budget is not any different document that you have to go through, read again. No. Capital, no, I can't accept there as an answer because everything is capital. Not income. Investment, consumption, expenditure, both are in the expenditures only. What's the 4th one? Can't forget that. That's like, the, what do you call, it's like the heart and lungs of economy. So obviously, all these 4 factors have been affected. It's because of the impact of these 4 factors that your economic growth has faltered. So each one of them, here we are talking about private investment. We are talking about private investment. Of course, corporate investment. Consumption, private consumption means consumption of people like you and I. 3rd comes your government spending. And 4th, of course, exports and imports. Because when the economy has completely closed down, you can't expect your exports. Of course, imports, forget about imports. Focus more on exports. So your budget, so this in the context of COVID, private investment has dropped down. Right, because nobody is investing. Number 2, when private investment has dropped down, what will happen to the jobs? Your jobs fall. Means the disposable income of people is gone. If disposable income is not there, where will your private consumption come from? Private consumption, the second component. So one major impact has been fall of private investment. That's a big headache for the government. Number 2, fall in the private consumption. People are not spending, you're not spending the same amount of money that you have spent before COVID. Just check yourselves. Check your budget, your family's budget. That's nothing but your private consumption. So when both these 2 parts of your national income are falling behind, that's when your government spending will become important. That's when your government spending becomes important. Government spending is nothing but public expenditure. If you remember, if you can recollect, public expenditure. Out of public expenditure, the most important part is capital expenditure, capex or capital expenditure. So when these 2 parts of your income, national income, are falling behind, see, end of the day it should balance out. So if these 2 are falling behind, this should rise. This should make up for the loss that's happening here and here. Obviously, right? This normal equation, mathematical equation. So in the era of COVID, it's the public expenditure, the eyes. So what are the expectations of the public, of the economy from the budget? Simple. The expectations are the government. First of all, it's about the spending of the government. How much is the government willing to spend? Because there is a fall in private investment and private consumption. In fact, if you just recollect, both of them are together, right? When there is consumption, there will be profits. Part of profits turn into investment. Private investment, then jobs, then disposable. It's like a virtuous cycle, self-fulfilling cycle. So the cycle is broken. So the first question that you need to ask in the era of COVID, when you are looking at government's budget document, is what is the government trying to do? Is the government increasing public expenditure? Is the government increasing public expenditure? Because it has to, there is no other way. Then second question is, what is the government doing to increase the incomes of the people? To increase the incomes of people. Incomes of people is nothing but jobs. Of course, if you have job, you will have good income. But there are other ways and means as well through which the government can put money in the hands of the people. So the second most important thing that you have to look at in the budget is how is the government trying to increase private consumption? Because it's obvious, as I said, see, economy is nothing but what you are doing at an individual level, extrapolate it to the entire country's level, the same thing happens. If you and your family are not spending the same amount of money that you used to spend before COVID, there is no way that the entire country can spend the same amount of money. Meaning, private consumption is still yet to reach the pre-COVID levels. Private consumption is yet to reach the pre-COVID levels. That's one thing you have to see. So what is the government doing to put additional money in the hands of the people? And finally, of course, how is the government, see, end of the day, private investment should be maximum, and the public investment should just complement the private investment. That's always a goal of a good working, a good well-functioning economy. Remember, it's not the other way around. Private investment should be higher. Public investment should just complement the private investment. But right now, the table is turned upside down. Public investment is like this, private investment is like this. So this should be brought to this level. That should be the goal. So you need to see what is the government doing. So both of them, in fact, this public expenditure and private investment, both of them go together hand in hand. Both of them go together hand in hand. At the same time, while this is being done, if the government is spending more, whenever the government talks about spending, what is the equivalent, the opposite equivalent which comes into picture? Where will the government get money from? Government has to get in one or the other way. One way is taxation. Yes, one way is taxation. And the second way is borrowing. What we call as borrowing, economists call as deficits. So whenever the government is talking about expenditure, there will always be a debate about how big the deficit of the government is going to be. Because government has to borrow, because the taxation levels, after a point of time, the government can't pinch. So every budget, the minute budget is around the corner, there will be debates about taxation. Why taxation? Less the taxation, more will be the money in the hands of the people. More will be disposable income. So these are some of the key areas whenever you are talking about budget. Budget is nothing. Don't get into the numbers. Don't get into the numbers. Of course, some basic numbers are required. But other than that, at least for UPSC, numbers are not required. For other examinations, yes, for RRB, all of them, yeah, they do require hard numbers. But it's not about numbers, it's about how the government is juggling the different branches, different components of the economy. So with this background, we have to see what the government is trying to. Yes, this last final component is your exports, net exports. So basically this, in fact, of all the four components, your exports are the one which are performing a bit as of now. So if you have been reading the news last month or so, so exports also have increased. So exports wise, we are at a better level compared to the rest of the three components. So having discussed what to look for in a budget document, always, see, the same things will be discussed in economic survey as well. So in a way, economic survey is like an index of the budget that comes the next day. So what has happened across these dimensions in the past year, economic survey will discuss that, and how is the government going to continue whatever is happening in the economy. That will be in your budget So all said and done, what did we discuss until now? We've discussed so many things, right? So we started with economic growth, tax structure, investment, private consumption, government expenditure, exports and imports. Exports and imports. There are these two. Everyone was expecting that the government will talk about something on these two components of the economy. Why? Obviously, number one, EVs, because right now the hot cake that's happening in the economy is electric vehicles, electric mobility, EV. So whether the government is going to provide certain benefits, certain rebates, that was being hotly discussed. And the second one is, of course, digital assets. What do we mean by digital assets? We are talking about cryptocurrencies. Crypto and, of course, digital currencies. We are talking about crypto and digital currencies. Because as of now, it's a gray area. They are not illegal, but they are not legal yet. They are not illegal, but they are not legal yet. So the budget was expected to say something about those things as well. So if you remember last year's budget, every budget the government is coming up with a theme of pillars. Themes or pillars. One year they are calling it as themes, and the other year they are calling as pillars. So just like last year, like you had 6 pillars last year, those are the 6 pillars. This year the government came up with 4 priorities or 4 pillars. The most important one of them being the PM Gati Shakti plan. What that is, like, that's what you have to see. See, once, if these are the 4 pillars, the entire budget, 80 to 90% of the budget announcements will revolve around these 4 things. And for the rest of the 1 year, your preparation should also be amongst these. Just confine yourself to the topics which are related to this. Which are related to this. That will be enough. Even for prelims, in fact, not just mains. Prelims as well. In economy, you can expect certain questions. So, yeah, the first pillar is PM Gati Shakti. In fact, I was just listening to the speech of Finance Minister. So, she was saying that, in fact, PM Gati Shakti will guide the other pillars as well. Why? Because, what is this PM Gati Shakti? We'll see in a while. Then second is inclusive development. This Gati Shakti is an infrastructural push plan, an infrastructure plan, a mega infrastructure development plan. If the government is talking about creation of infrastructure, that's nothing but investment. Where will the government invest? The government will invest in constructing roads, constructing dams, constructing, SCZs. So this is all about the investment of the government, meaning public expenditure. Number 2, the second pillar is inclusive development. Of course, what is inclusive development? Including all sections of the population which have been excluded, the simplest definition. In a way, inclusive development also has a component of human development. The second component or the second focus area of the budget where the government wants to put certain additional amount of money in the hands of the people so that their consumption expenditure can increase is what is about inclusive development. In fact, inclusive development becomes all the more important in the era of COVID because it was the weaker sections who have become much more weaker. No, it's not the rich people. Rich have become more richer in COVID.
K-shaped recovery.
Yes, K-shaped recovery. Then third one is productivity enhancement. The government is talking about productivity enhancement of entire economy where they have given up certain different sectors, sunrise sectors, climate action, energy transition. What is the sunrise opportunities? Sunrise sector or sunrise opportunities? Budget is saying that the government is going to focus on sunrise opportunities. We'll get back there. And the fourth one is, of course, financing of investments. Where is the government going to get the money from? That's the biggest question, right? All this bhashan, 1, 2, 3, and like they can speak for hours together. But when it comes to the fourth component of the budget, that's when the real problem starts. Where will the money come from? course, end of the day, it's the people. So meaning taxation. Taxation and public debt. That's another thing which you need to focus upon. So these are the 4 pillars of this year's budget compared to, it's more or less a rehashing of the 6 pillars of last year. So they have just taken out this health and well-being and they have put in it inclusive development, because inclusive development includes everything. It includes education, health, skills, all those things. So yeah, one important announcement is this. Focus on sunrise sectors. Within the productivity enhancement, they are saying that they are going to focus on sunrise opportunities. What are sunrise opportunities? I'm not able to see the chats online, but anyhow. Sunrise means what? Something which is just starting, right? A sun's rising. So it's like a fresh sun. So when it comes to economy, sunrise sectors are those sectors of the economy which are very new in nature, emerging technologies, where the sector as such is yet to develop. It did not mature yet. We don't know whether it's going to become an important leg of the economy. We don't know anything about it. Generally, it's the private sector, your venture capital firms, the private capital which invests in these sunrise sectors. But of lately, like the technologies, just for example, your battery technology, EV battery technology. EV in itself is a sunrise sector. Within EV, the core of EV rests on battery technology. It's all about batteries now. If your batteries are going to give you longevity, more range, your EVs will be successful. If not, the entire EV sector is going to be a failure. So battery technology is a sunrise sector. So it's good that the government is focusing, it's explicitly saying that it is going to focus on the sunrise opportunities. So everywhere, in education as well, in energy, in financial improvement of financial literacy. So anywhere, the government is saying that it's going to focus on these sunrise opportunities. Yes, another important thing that is of relevance for us is, where is the money coming from? Revenues, because budget is all about money. How much money am I getting? How much money I am willing to spend? So we need to focus on where the government is receiving its money from. Questions generally are asked already from this particular component. They'll ask you the increasing or decreasing order. Generally, it's the decreasing order. Means, where is the money coming from? The largest share of money to the government's revenues, where are they coming from? That's the question. So the government expects that it starts with, because taxes are the most important revenues that the government get, right? So it starts with your income tax, excise duty, corporation tax, GST. If you remember, tax revenues themselves are classified into tax revenues, non-tax revenues. Within tax revenues, direct tax revenues, indirect tax revenues. So all that, of course, they won't give you that much of class here. So that much of content here. So your borrowings are also non-tax revenues, customs duties. So these are, take out borrowings and liabilities, of course. If you don't consider that, if you look at the tax resources, the assumption is that your income tax and corporation tax, income tax, of course, we are talking about personal income tax, whereas corporation tax on the companies. So the government is expecting the lion's share of your tax revenues from your income tax and your corporation tax. So both of them are direct taxes. So we should see, which is good, because indirect taxes shouldn't fund the government expenditure. It's more and more, it should be the direct taxes which should fund the government expenditure. So, yeah, these are the expected revenue receipts of the government. Likewise, when you have receiving some money, you are more concerned about, in fact, You're more concerned about your expenditures. I mean, at least a smart guy should focus on expenditures. Incomes anyway will come. You don't have to do anything if there is some income that is supposed to come. But expenditure, you should have a very keen eye because you have to stop certain wasteful expenditures. So where is the government spending its revenues? These are some of the places where the government is spending. So if you look at the important, these are anyhow constitutional responsibilities. So you can't negotiate much with them. In the last sessions, Finance Commission, how Finance Commission has transferred. So the devolution, the share in devolution, Finance Commission grants. So those are unavoidable expenditures for the government. But so keeping them aside, look at the other expenditures. The most important expenditure is your interest payment. Interest payment is nothing but your debt servicing. So interest payments are occupying the lion's share of the government's expenditures, which is bad thing, right? Because interest payments, they don't create any assets. They don't create any assets. So that's like wasteful expenditure. What you have borrowed in the past, that is taking away your major share of your revenues. So it's not creating any kind of durable asset. Then apart from that, yes, we have your central sector schemes and centrally sponsored schemes. So schemes together, they are around 24 to 25%. So 1/4 is going into schemes. The difference between central sector and central sponsored schemes? Yes, central sector, yes, completely owned and operated by central government, whereas centrally sponsored, there will be a share between the states and government of India, based on some percentage. Yes, so yes, again, schemes, subsidies, defense, yes, the most important one. We require it, right? And other expenditure. In fact, this other expenditure, because if you look at the rest of the expenditures, you can't really negotiate. The government doesn't have that much of leeway there to operate because you have to run the schemes, you have to give whatever the shares of the states are, then you have to have interest payments, that is non-negotiable. Defense expenditure, you can't appear to be weak. Then likewise, subsidies, particularly in the era of COVID. Right now, COVID has broken the backbone. So subsidies become important, subsidies to all sectors, not just one particular sector, subsidies to all sectors. So it is here that other expenditure that the government can do something, meaning if it has to create certain assets which are durable and which have certain impact on wealth generation, it is here, meaning I'm talking about capex. Capital expenditure, all this technically is not. See, they may be used later on. Once you send the money to the states may or may not. Most of the state governments, they don't because they themselves are not having money. So they can't spend anything on capital expenditure by themselves. So this is the expenditure which has some value. All the other expenditures are not. We shouldn't say that actually because, for example, pensions, social security, it's part of inclusive growth, it's part of human development. So it's not really wasteful expenditure, but when you talk in terms of capital expenditure, all these expenditures are not really capital expenditures. They don't create any capital. They don't create any fixed capital. So one thing that we need to check whenever you are going through budget is, of the expenditures, what is the share of capital expenditure of the government? More and more, year on year, like of lately, it has been the practice, not just of lately. Year on year, like it's your revenue expenditure which is shooting up, whereas your capital expenditure is going down. And government is also resorting to creative accounting methods where they are showing the revenue expenditure as capital expenditure. While reading budget deficits, and you read that, right? Different types of deficits. What are they? I'm not asking like what are the types of deficits, but there we have seen the creative accounting practices of the government. If I'm giving something to state government, don't count it as deficit. Capital funds given to state governments for creation of capital assets, that shouldn't be counted as part of deficit. Which type of deficit was that? At least you remember the story where the government of India started crying that no, we are giving so much of money to states. So, and states are, if they are using it to create some capital asset, so that shouldn't be counted as deficit. So, remove that deficit. So, it started with budget deficit, then it came to fiscal deficit, then it came to, fine, it's okay, go back and there's something called as primary deficit, effective revenue deficit. Remember those words?
Yeah, effective.
Primary deficit, effective revenue deficit. First, go back, read the budget chapter, read all those definitions, refresh the concepts, or else this entire discussion will be completely like wasteful expenditure, which will not add any asset to your brain. So this is about the expenditure and the revenue part. So these are the areas from which the money is coming from, and these are the areas where the money is going from. Then your budget also has given certain composition of expenditure. So where is, as whatever we have discussed just now, it's in a form of a block. So look at the interests. Interests are occupying the highest amount of your expenditure component. So interest, defense is also equally big. Pensions. So what was this PM Gati Shakti? In fact, PM Gati Shakti was announced around 6 months ago, I think. The Prime Minister announced. This is what happens when your urge to be in news constantly robs off the budget of its worthy items. This is not nothing. This is not anything new. It was already announced 6 months ago. PM Gati Shakti, that we are not 6 months, around 3 months ago, I think. I don't know what was the occasion, but like Independence Day. Okay, yeah, Independence Day, I think. So yeah, so it's around 6 months. The government, the Prime Minister came and like he can't stop the urge, right? So to be in news. So he announced it already. The same thing has been rehashed and announced in the budget now. So what is this PM Gati Shakti? It's a master plan for infrastructural development. It's a master plan for infrastructure development. So they have some huge plans and huge budget ideas, money ideas with respect to this Gati Shakti. So infrastructure, you name it, all sorts of infrastructure is announced under it. Roads, ports, railways. In fact, multimodal infrastructure. Multimodal means joining everything, where you can have the mode of transport of your choice. So it's like reducing difficulties to access, to move goods, to exports and for imports. So the idea is that this Gati Shakti, this is going to create the next generation infrastructure that is required for our economy to become $5 trillion economy and whatever, right? So these are some of the components of this Gati Shakti that have been announced in today's budget. These are just, key points, that's it. These are just filler points. They won't give us much content. So what we need to look forward, going forward, is each one of them will have a specific goal, specific way and means that which that goal is to be achieved. So those will be announced as policies and as different schemes as we go forward. But if you just look at them, It's about expanding the highways, means basically highway construction. So yeah, it also has logistics. Then four multimodal parks to be announced. Yeah, this railways. This is about railways. We won't go into the details of what they are going to do, but generally this is about the Gati Shakti plan, which, see, it also becomes relevant because earlier there used to be a separate rail budget, but now that it has been merged, because railways also plays a very important role in the capex plans of the government. So in fact, if railways itself has one share, then all the rest of the infrastructure components will have equal share. So that's the importance that we give to railways. So right now the idea is that we should integrate your railways with other infrastructure components. That's about your PM Gati Shakti. Then if there is one sector which has come out unscathed during COVID, this entire COVID 3 rounds, what are we calling them? I'm not able to recollect the word. Third phase? Wave, yeah, we are calling this wave. So, yeah, the third wave of COVID. Irrespective of the waves of COVID, if there is one sector which has not at all impacted, in fact, because of COVID, the growth rates, the investment that has gone into agriculture have increased compared to the past years, which is highlighted in the growth rates. So it started here, right? So it started somewhere here. COVID. So compared to the fall, of course it's falling when you compare it to the previous years, but we should overlap it with your manufacturing sector's degrowth. So agriculture has remained resilient and robust. So they are expecting around 4 to 4.2%. If you remember agriculture session, one way of looking at the strength of agriculture, or at least for the Indian circumstances, we need agriculture growth rate at a minimum of at least 4%. Remember that number? So agriculture, we need to grow it by at least by 4% if it has to feed and if it has to provide the employment. So the government is also saying the same thing, that our agriculture and food processing, of course agriculture and allied sectors, have been very robust in the COVID era. It's also because people went back to villages and they started working there. So one important announcement that the government has been doing continuously, yes, it has done it last year as well. Last year it was just 1 point, but this year they've made it, so it's basically talking about organic, some form of organic farming, or your zero budget natural farming. So the government is somehow mainstreaming, it wants to mainstream this organic farming. So natural farming or organic farming. It also becomes important. We have to see how we are going to do it, because yeah, that one poster boy that we come across whenever we talk about 100% organic farm is which state? Sikkim, yes. It's easy to manage in Sikkim. Sikkim is like the poster boy where they have converted into 100% agriculture. Sikkim is a very small state. It's like 1/4 of Hyderabad. So it's easy to manage it there. But can it be replicated? Can we achieve the scale if we expand it to the entire country? That's a question. And we recently have a very bad experience. Sri Lanka, yes. They have turned it and it has been an economic disaster for them. All said and done, organic farming or natural farming is expensive. It's expensive. The yields are not as high as your synthetic farming or your synthetic fertilizers. Anyways, we need to see that. So that's one announcement that which has attracted my attention. So keep watching. There will be some schemes, some announcements by the government. So yeah, and while reading agriculture chapter, if you remember, one issue that Indian agriculture faces is around 30 to 35% of the crop produce is lost before it leaves the farms. So, and one way to arrest that loss of produce is food processing, right? So the government is, yes, one way to decrease the loss increase the yields of the farmers and also incomes of the farmers is to encourage the food processing sector. We have been doing it. So promoting post-harvest value addition, consumption and branding of millet products. So we have been doing that food processing, encouraging food processing, but not too much. The outcomes are yet to be seen. So that's one announcement the government has done. Then yes, use of technology for agriculture. Use of technology for agriculture. So whatever the Kisan channels, whatever the credit, so they want to deliver digital and high-tech services to farmers in PPP mode. And agriculture, the debate around agriculture also becomes important for obvious reasons of the whatever has happened around the farm laws. So what we need to look forward to in the future for this year is there will be one or the other way, there will be discussions about whatever the farm laws have tried to do, they will be discussed. Of course, they won't try to push them again because it's also politically suicidal. So that can't happen. 2020, since 2024 is also election year. But whatever the farm laws have tried to address, those components now will be focused upon an individual basis, rather than completely pushing the existing infrastructure. What I suspect is that whatever the individual components are under the farm laws, they will now focus on each one of them. So we need to see, but the debate won't go away, because all said and done, yes, Indian agriculture requires some kind of change. It can't be the situation as usual, so it can't be like that, but whatever has been suggested by farm laws also was not correct. So in fact, we need to see the details of the budget, whether they are trying to do anything, because it has been expected that the government will try to either tackle the issues that farm laws have brought up in an indirect way. So we need to see for what exactly the government is planning. Then this is one announcement that they have made. It's not required to be made in a budget, but the government made it. It's part of the bigger project called as, yes. So it's still going on, interlinking of rivers, so which again will make it a relevant point for your examination, relevant topic for examination, all the debates around interlinking of rivers, the positives, the negatives that they will bring. So that's about the agriculture. In fact, whenever you're talking about agriculture in the budget, one debate, constant debate that arises is about the food grains that we are storing. PDS, we were reading PDS. We know that the government of India maintains food grains, right? So the reserve PDS, how many food grains are there? How many are required versus how many are being maintained by the government? Obviously, they are by 4x around. Whatever we are mandated to store, the government is storing around 4x, 4 times of what is required. So all that is nothing but subsidy. We are basically subsidizing this overproduction. So that's one debate which will keep watching for that. Yeah, if you look at the technological aspects, yes, high-tech services, yeah, that's fine, SMS delivery services. But one thing, yes, the government is talking about Kisan drones, number one. It is also talking of blended capital to finance agriculture startup. Blended capital, nothing but PPP, your private and also your public. So Kisan drones, we need to see how the government. So if you remember, one problem of Indian agriculture is there is lack of mechanization. There is lack of, one of the biggest problems is because of many reasons. So if drones can be used, that problem of mechanization can be, of course, not complete. They can't replace your mechanization completely. But in certain areas, we can make up for whatever we have lost because of lack of mechanization. So those are the two things that you need to link up. Then comes your inclusive growth. So obviously, inclusive growth involves education, health, sanitation, women, children, and all such things. So, inclusive growth is also about financial inclusion. So, there is this Jal Jeevan mission, which you must have read for GS already. So, under that there is Har Ghar Nal Se Jal, basically domestic tap water, connecting all the households with tap connection, drinking water. So, part of your sanitation campaigns. Then housing, PM Awas Yojana, housing for all by 2022, that's the scheme, right? So, it's talking about PM Awas Yojana. Then yes, this is a new scheme that they have announced. PM Divine, for some reason, so just look at these two things. Northeast, it's basically an infrastructure development scheme for the Northeast. This is interesting, based on the felt needs. Go back and see what the felt needs are. So, idea is that the government won't pre-decide that, okay, this is what we are going to develop. Rather, it's like community participation, at least theoretically. The idea is that what are felt needs, you might not, or the government might not identify them as required, but you feel them. For example, like, I have to go to a movie. Simplistic. I feel that I have to go to a movie. It's a felt need. Is it really required? No. Something like that. So the concept of felt needs is advanced. Tackling the felt needs of people is an advanced concept. It's a good concept. So we should see how exactly that's going to be done in Northeast. Then, as part of inclusive and welfare, the government is saying that yes, it is also going to start aspirational blocks program. There is a pilot which has happened already. So aspirational blocks program, there is something called as aspirational district programs, 115 aspirational districts. All the backward districts on the human development indicators front are focused, high focus districts. So within those districts now, the government is focusing on the blocks, the backward blocks. So yes, that's how you can achieve inclusive growth. What was this program, aspirational districts program? It's not any different scheme. Rather, there will be oversight of the government of India on all components of human development, education, how all the rest of the schemes are being implemented in those districts. The government of India will have a keen oversight. So there is no additional funding under that program, but it was the Niti Aayog will oversee that project. So that was there. Then yes, Vibrant Villages program in the northern borders. Digital banking by post offices. Digital banking by post offices. So government is saying that 100% post offices, because it's the post office which are fulfilling the financial needs of rural people. Even in India today, like around 60 to 70% of the population resides in rural areas. So you don't have formal financial sector there. So the government is saying that it's going to digitalize all the post offices, and they are going to be made part of your core banking solution. What is core banking solution? Question. It was already a previous year prelims question, but anyhow. So digital payment. The government is also going to encourage digital payments. The government said that it is going to prod your commercial banks to establish digital banks where all the digital payments will be only digital payments will be carried out in those banks. Then government is also saying that it is going to focus, of course, one sector of the economy which has been affected disproportionately was your MSME sector. MSME also becomes important because it feeds the larger economy. Most of our exports are from MSMEs. MSMEs, they cater to the villages. They employ people who from the lowest background. So because of all these reasons, MSMEs have a very important role to achieve inclusive growth. So the government also has realized that. So whatever, these are some of the schemes that the government has announced, and they have been given, particularly this particular scheme, Emergency Credit Linked Guarantee Scheme. This was the scheme that the government used, and it's still using. It has expanded the scope of the scheme. What is that scheme? It gives loans to the MSMEs. Now government is going to back, because MSMEs, they can't give any security or surety. So the government, during the times of COVID, it has relied on this particular scheme, which was good and bad. We'll see that later. So these are some of the steps that the government wants to take. So interlinking of all portals, revamping. Again, this is another scheme, Credit Guarantee Trust for MSME. So it's like a trust scheme. And whatever the scheme, but that scheme, some raise ramp scheme is announced. The idea is that MSMEs also have an important role to play in inclusive growth. Remember that. So if there is a question on inclusive growth, touch upon MSMEs. If it is MSMEs, touch upon inclusive growth. So that's the government's, one component of government's inclusive growth. Second component, of course, is your education. Education. Until now, we had universalization of primary education, which was already achieved. That goal has been finished. Now, universalization of quality education is the goal, according to the government. Of course, it will use technology and digital technology for achieving this. It will use digital technology for achieving this. These are some of the ways in which it wants to. You can go through them later on. There's nothing to explain there. Then skill development. Of course, we are in the midst of a churn in terms of reskilling, de-skilling, reskilling, and upskilling of individual skills do play a major role, right? So the focus is on skill development as well. Then comes your health. Then comes your health. So National Digital Health Ecosystem. Telemental, this is one program that's being launched. Then the government also said that there will be a digital portal which connects healthcare patients, healthcare providers, private sector. So it's going to create that, you will be given a unique identifier. So it is also focusing on that. Yes, this is the productive, the third pillar that the government was talking about. If you remember, there were 4 pillars, right? This is the third pillar, productivity enhancement and investment. So there are 2 components under this. One is ease of doing business. The formatting is not proper. The second one is ease of living. Productivity enhancement. See, productivity is of 2 types. Productivity of the firms, and second, productivity of individual as well. So you have to focus on both type of the productivity. So when it comes to companies and firms, the government is saying that there is a second dimension of ease of doing. All these days we were talking about ease of doing business index, ease of doing whatever that index was. So now we are talking about the 2.0 version, and these are some of the measures under that. 5G, again, word which is in news continuously these days, right? So the PLI scheme, there was that scheme, Productivity Linked Incentive Scheme, which production linked incentive scheme. So the government says that it is going to give 5G, and rest of them are just points which won't require much explanation. And ease of living. This is one component which the government has introduced. Ease of living is to improve the quality of life, the life experiences of people. So under that it said that Ease of travel will be of essence, and as part of the ease of travel, it is going to issue e-passports. The government is going to issue, what are e-passports? There will be a chip in your passport, which will have all your personal data, and particularly it is in the context of the vaccine certificates. Then ease of living, as part of it, it's going to help people who are living in urban areas. Building bylaws in urban townships, most of the times you have problems. So the rental agreements, the government is focusing on those aspects. Urban planning, yes, this is one thing. Providing a battery swapping policy alternative to setting up charging stations in urban areas. A new, focus on sunrise sector. So the government is saying that one idea is TOD, transit-oriented development. What's transit-oriented development? You have to travel, you have to commute, right? So while developing a particular region itself, it can go both the ways. While establishing a factory or developing infrastructure, road connectivity after certain factories have been established. So the idea is that the government will make sure that there is connectivity when it comes to development of regions, development of urban areas. Last mile connectivity is also part of transit-oriented development. What is last mile connectivity? You have metro. You have metro like this. But a person who is living 5 kilometers away from the metro is going like this. But a person can live somewhere here, right? So this place, this part of the system, this part of the transport should also be connected. Because he can't, what's the point if he's using his private transport until the metro station where you don't have any parking lots? So what is he doing? He's only using his private transport, means his car or his bike. So in India, last mile connectivity is one of the worst in the world. India's last mile connectivity is one of the worst. So we don't have buses, we don't have, yes, these private guys, they run autos, but anyhow, that's a different discussion. The government is saying that since we are in the discussions of EVs, and EVs, since the batteries are like the hearts of the EV, so the government is talking about battery swapping policy. Just like, you'll just swap a battery, give the discharged battery, take a charged battery, put it and leave. So it's like refilling. So the government is saying that it's going to include it under your ease of living. And finally, financing of investment. Where is the money going to come from? That's the question. Government is saying that one important component is PPP. It's saying that it's going to encourage PPP, private investment. Number one, public-private partnership. Number two, it's also saying, I don't know why they have put it here. It's no way going to help it's just a step that the government is going to introduce digital rupee. So that's one thing that the government is doing. There's a difference between digital rupee and cryptocurrency. Okay, both of them are not the same. So these are some of the ways that the government is saying that it is going to mobilize resources. So blended finance for sunrise sectors, private investment, private equity investment, infrastructure status for data centers and energy storage systems. Again, that concept of assigning, that concept of giving infrastructure status to certain companies is certain sectors of the industry is concept. Then green bonds. Of course, we are talking about climate financing. So government said that it is going to have a focus on climate finance and sustainable development as well. Green bonds. While reading bonds, you must know what are green bonds. Green bonds are bonds where the money that is raised will be used only in green projects. It's as simple as that. Then that's what the central government can do. The government is also saying that when it comes to states, we are going to provide greater fiscal autonomy to the states. How? Number one, of course, year on year, the devolution, the finance commission transfers, the devolution, finance commission grants are increasing. So the government is saying that on one hand we are strengthening through the direct transfers to the states. On the other hand, the government said during this COVID time, government has allowed the states to borrow beyond a certain limit of their gross state domestic product. So this 4%, a fiscal deficit of 4%. Earlier it used to be 1.5 to 2.5 depending upon the financial health of the states. So as part of this COVID related package, as part of GST compensation agreements between the government and the states, the government of India has allowed states to borrow. So cut short the discussion, the idea is that government is saying it's a state's responsibility to spend whatever you want to spend. Because if the state government is borrowing, it has to repay. So that's what the government of India is saying. So yeah, it is providing greater fiscal space as well. So mostly it is private investment. Then second, state governments have to also chip in. They also have to contribute to the development. Then tax proposals, you can go through them later on. But simply put, there haven't been any changes in the tax slabs. See, when it comes to tax proposals, you have income tax and you have corporation tax. Yes, direct tax, indirect tax is one type of classification. See, when it comes to why aren't we discussing indirect tax that much? Because indirect taxes, after GST, there isn't much that the government can do through budget in terms of indirect taxes. Why? Everything is being done by GST Commission now. So the GST Commission takes care of everything. So the government can't really tinker much there. So it's generally these two areas that the taxation proposals are about. So if you remember, we have started our discussion with respect to putting more money in the hands of the people. So on that aspect, on that front, the tax slabs of individuals haven't been changed. In fact, the government has introduced a crypto tax now. So that's one good thing which has happened. All these days, the cryptocurrencies have not been identified by the government. So with this announcement that the government is going to charge 30%. So 30% is the highest tax bracket. So the government is assuming that even if you are selling your kidney and investing in crypto, the government is assuming that you are the richest persons of the country. So you belong to the richest group of the country because 30% is charged on the highest income of, if you earn more than 10 lakhs, that's when this starts, 30% taxation. Any income above 10 lakhs starts 30% taxation. So there are some people who are selling some kidneys, one of their kidneys, and putting in crypto. So irrespective of that, you will be charged at 30% rate. So this is a good thing. At least the government is not, because there was a debate of government banning the entire crypto space. So now that it is taxing means it is legitimate now. So anyone can invest, so you also can invest. So find out which hospital is doing those kidney surgeries. Other than that, these are all, qualitative changes, not quantitative changes. What people require is a quantitative taxation change. Of course, qualitative is also important, but qualitative experiences matter for people who are filing taxes and for people of higher income brackets. For the poor people, those things won't matter, middle class particularly. So that's about taxation. And finally, these are some of the allocations which have been given by the government. So as usual, the Ministry of Defence has the highest allocations. Then comes your agriculture. Not immediately, of course you have railways, but agriculture is also being given because you have subsidies, enough food subsidies, fertilizer subsidies. Numbers are not important, just for your reference purpose. So yes, this is, we need, of course, there will be a lot of analysis on what has not been said. Generally, it's not about what has been said. It's always about what's not said. So all those things will come once we look into the finer aspects of the, and there will be some changes. These are just proposals. Most probably that crypto thing it won't go away, but 30% is too high. You can't expect, because everyone, see, on one hand we are talking about financial inclusion, bringing in digital, bringing in new sources of finance. And on the other hand, it's like you're punishing people. Why should you assume that only a person who earns more than 10 lakhs is investing in crypto? On one hand, the government wants more and more people come into financial markets, equity markets, and invest in them. On the other hand, the government is doing this. So most probably it might be reduced a bit. But other than that, we don't have much in the taxation. So this is about the entire debate around budget. After looking at all this, what exactly has come up? What did we discuss? Of course, we have discussed what the government wanted us to discuss. But end of the day, it's business as usual. End of the day, it's business as usual. Everything will go on. The government will find some innovative ways to get more revenues. It tries to cut back the expenditures as much as possible. So at least the good thing that the government hasn't increased taxes. At least that they haven't announced anything increase in taxes. So the budget discussions are technically, they are just discussions. What will come out of discussions? Nothing most of the times. We discuss, we end the discussion, and once we are tired, then we go back and we lead our normal lives. I am not saying this. You must have heard R.K. Lakshman, right? One of the legendary cartoonists of India. So it was his cartoon. He did this guy. It's like he's a creation of R.K. Lakshman, right? A common man. So he will be there in most of his cartoons. So it's simply like saying, like, so this is budget analysis. What are you able to understand here? Nothing. So R.K. Lakshman said it long ago. We are just reliving it. So is the case with budget analysis. There will be analysis for 1 week. There will be a lot of analysis. At the end of the day, nothing much will change. So that's about our discussion. So budget and economic survey, they go hand in hand together, in fact. So, and pretty soon we are going to start our economic survey and budget classes as well, because that's when we'll complete economy as a whole. I hope this session was informative. At least it has given how to look at budget rather than just numbers. Numbers are not important for us. Philosophies of budget and how economic survey and budget most of the times are closely interlinked. So both of them are a commentary on the economy of the past year and the coming 1 year. So with that, we'll end this session. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, now is the time. We didn't discuss much, so. All right, okay. Thank you.